It's about creating a gap between the character and the opponent. Because this is what we also have to do very early in our story. We have to tell who is the character, who is this story about, and who is the opponent, the antagonist, and establish a conflict. So first you sell the pitch. Why should I look? And then you establish the main character, the opponent, and the conflict. Once you've done that, you have made a label to the audience on what kind of story could we expect to see. And moving on, and here is what's interesting. Very often, when I read stuff investigative journalists have done, when I listen to radio or watch TV, the reporter is the character. It is the reporter's hunt for truth. But that's the real character. But when I see the story, the reporter is not the character. In some way, we feel ashamed of, stepping forward. And it's a very thin line of being, fake and clumsy and like the superhero reporter saving the world. I hate that. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that this is one of the reasons Serial is so successful. This is Sarah Koenig. She is the show host. She's the narrator. She is the character. And I've listened to both seasons. I don't know anything about her. Nothing. I don't know. I do know by picture, and I can assume what she's like, but there's no introduction of her as a character. There's nothing about her history, and yet she is very personal, not private. When we did Johannes, that was a private story on him, with his struggle and in the end meeting the opponent, the prime minister, the lonely, weak reporter building up tension against but she is absolutely not private, but very personal. She would go and say, I wonder why this is blah, blah, blah. Have I totally misinterpreted this situation? I feel like blah, blah, blah. And she's very personal, and since I have no feelings for her either way, I can identify with what she says. The identification is 100%, even though I have no knowledge of her. And I think we should be inspired by that. I think we can be a lot more personal and broad-minded. What if the opponent is right? What if everything that I've researched so far is wrong? What if I'm too stupid? And that's raising the gap between the strong opponent and the weak character. The reporter as an underdog, not the superhero. Asking the stupid questions, not being a smartass. That's how I think you can avoid this feeling we have of being super reporters going out there saving the world. Because I hate that too. But this is a solution. Establish the conflict. And then you go down to then you can have background, you can deepen the characters, and focus on the weakness of the main character. How the hell can we, 3 reporters from Ukraine, misunderstood what the government? I mean, the government, they have been doing, the police have like 100 years of investigative crime. We must interpret this wrong. We must have missed something. You know, being an underdog, developing the character. Best case scenario is that you actually have a real person, not a reporter, and strengthen the opponent. And then you have side stories. Side stories that you can establish and that you would have to end in your main story. Don't establish a side story that is not being ended. And the side story could be to turn perspective and do what I said. Could it be that the opponent, the government, the company is actually correct? Let us do everything in order to have their arguments on the table and to investigate them. And if you have a good story, they will be wrong. If you don't have a good story, then don't publish. And then this is, I mean, I'm going through this pretty fast because now it started to get intense. When doing television, you have long scenes in the beginning, long pictures. The more to the end you come, the shorter scenes you have, the shorter dialogue. It's like a Christmas tree lying down, you know? And you have point of no return. And you've all seen Killing Pavel, right? If you haven't seen it, see it. It's a very, very good documentary by some of the best journalists I've seen. It's fantastic. The point of no return in that story is when they get hold of the agent and having an interview or a discussion with him on like a parking place. From that point, you can't go back. There is no way of going back saying, you know, it's probably an ordinary police investigation. They probably did everything right. It's probably not a problem. From that point, you would have to have a final battle with the secret forces conducting the killing. There's no way back. And I'm saying this because I'm going to return to Killing Pavel in the end, very soon, as a matter of fact. And then you have the climax, the conflict resolution. And if the technology is with us, now, for 47 minutes, the character could be a bit stronger, but these are the reporters struggling to find the truth. In a wave-formed development, it has been more and more intense. Could we be wrong? No, he's actually Secret Service. We found a plate for the car. Oh, damn, we can't see it because the image is not clear enough. We find a guy who can solve it. On and on towards the climax. Towards the climax. the final battle, if it was a fiction, it would be the main character. If it's an action movie, it will be a fight, you know. For the very last time, the character has to strengthen all the forces he or she has to fight the strong, almost unbeatable opponent. And in this case, you have these guys, normal people without any government approval, doing an investigation, going so much further than the police, and there's a Secret Service connection, and he disappears, and everything points towards the government. So here we are, final battle between the reporters and the authorities. Okay, are you ready for the final battle? Is it okay, Anna?
She said she could not provide
further details about the ongoing investigation.
Here comes the
So
battle.
journalists turned to the only people capable of responding to their findings. They requested interviews with all authorities involved in the investigation. President Poroshenko did not respond. The Ukrainian Security Service and the General Prosecutor's Office both declined interviews. And the Interior Minister, who oversees the police, did not reply.
That's it. Anna, not much of a fight. I want to see blood. And I say that I would never use this example if I didn't think that Killing Pavel is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Really, it's really, really good. No, but you did. Oh, that's a bit of a. What is in my computer? You don't know. You don't know the ending. Wait until you see it. All right. We still have a couple of minutes left. Once we reached the ending, we must answer the questions that we asked in the beginning. And that doesn't mean that we have to have an actually answer to the question, but we have to raise the question. Like in Killing Pavel, they still don't know who killed Pavel, and that doesn't matter. They have told a super interesting story, and in the end, after this huge battle in front of the gate to the president, with the reporters demanding answers, being thrown out, they could say, we asked the question whether the police did a thorough investigation. I think the answer to that question is no. The only question still remaining is, who killed Pavel? Goosebumps. Now, I wanted to end this session with showing 4 minutes of the Prime Minister, but you will have to see that online. It is actually exactly when if you believe in, if you're a New Age person, you have like waves. When all the waves are crossing each other, you are lucky, and we were lucky. It's a very good interview. Maybe I can start it with some questions being asked. So we have a few minutes, right? Go ahead, shoot. I should have my. Yep.
In the beginning, you mentioned that you started questioning the way you tell investigative stories 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And to me, for 20 plus years experience, this sounds quite late. So what happened 1.5 years ago that made you reconsider?
I got really tired of. I mean, I went to journalism school. I did science, and in science we use models. You know, I'm not sure of the English word for it, but hypothetical. You know, you try something, you get a result, you get a new hypothesis. You know, we have models for everything. But when it came to telling stories, I noticed that no one in Uppdrag Granskning, and we're like 10, 15 reporters, no one has gone to film school. Some of them are really good storytellers by the gut feeling. And you know, sometimes I felt like, yeah, this was pretty good. Why was it good? Don't know, really. And how can I improve it? I don't know. And I really wanted to develop my way of doing storytelling. And the only way to do that is to go back into theory, because that will give you tools. And the good thing of doing it after 20 years is that I know what a good story looks like. I can do it. And by adding the new knowledge, or just by thinking of it, I think, you know, I was telling, I think it was Anna, that it doesn't really matter who you go listening to or what kind of method you do. It's like going to the shrink, you know. Is it psychoanalysis? Is it cognitive therapy? It doesn't matter. You think about how you feel and you try to improve. And that's pretty much what how I see the way that I've looked on storytelling. I went. There's an old guru, a really, you know, old-fashioned Robert McKee. He's like a creative writing trainer for Hollywood. He's world famous. I went to attend a course for him this winter while doing a story on sexual abuse among UN soldiers towards children. And all his jokes were like from the 80s, and you know, but he knew his Hollywood shit. And as I was sitting there for 3 days, I wrote the script to that story, and it's now being nominated for Prix Europa, which is a very, you know, high fashion competition in television competition. He said like, you know, every scene has to have development. When we as journalists have a scene or a chapter, if you're doing print, you say, you know, the government is lying about the time because they say that 5 o'clock it was daylight. But it was only until 5:30. So you start by, you know, this chapter is going to be about the government being wrong, and then it's about government being wrong all the way down. We used to work like that, like a stair, you know, factual stair. You educate the audience piece by piece leading up to the same knowledge as we have. Now, he said, every chapter has to have a development. So I did that. When I wrote the script, before we shot the scene, before we started doing interviews, and this was about Central African Republic, and UN troops being there, the Africans were, you know, killing each other in thousands, and the French soldiers came there. They stopped the killing. But some of the soldiers raped children, and then the UN covered that up. That was our story. So every chapter I decided to value the start and the ending. So every chapter was like, first chapter, people are killing each other in thousands, negative. And then telling the story how they are killing each other in thousands, fleeing towards the airport, but the friends came to rescue, positive. Next stage, the main character enters, the super Swedish UN head of human rights. He said, God, I must fix more troops to Central African Republic. I must strengthen the French troops. So he fights within the UN to get more troops into Central African Republic to stop the killing, because he's been there, he saw it, he's a witness. And in the end we say, could you imagine that this will turn out to be one of the biggest crises for the UN in modern history, and that you would be the main character? Negative. Next scene. The French troop being the heroes, they've been celebrated by all the people in Africa. But there's a rumor going on among the boys. You could enter the guards at nighttime and get extra food if you would do some dirty things. Negative. And I just followed his, it was just theory. And I just decided I will try. And it turned out, really, and it was fun. And that's what I want to encourage you. Start thinking about storytelling, because it's really fun. You can add something. All right.
You said about storytelling and the power of storytelling, and you told about fascination, and there was something second one, and then a tiny piece of information. I just wonder, don't you think that this way of thinking that we have on the little piece of information in the future will make investigation more like a fiction or a cinema or an entertainment rather than a journalism?
When you look at, when you listen to Serial for like 12 hours, there is not one single piece of thread that is not have been investigated thoroughly. I'm not saying that we should skip information. I'm just saying that we should package the information differently. This is not about publishing research. And that's what most of us do. We publish research without demanding ourselves to wrap it up in a way that we reach the audience. You can tell a story with help of the tools of storytelling, and in between you can load the audience with exactly the information you need to provide. Some say you can't show documents in television. Sometimes you need to show documents because you need to have the prosecutor know that you actually have the documents. It's some kind of proof. In other stories, you don't need documents. In other stories, you don't need long quotes. We should try to think of the way we tell stories as much as possible without making it, without simplifying. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would have one question. You mentioned shortly it must be bleeding, right? There must be a conflict. What do you think? What about positive elements in a story? What about empowering digital storytelling? Is that an option as well? I mean, is that something the audience want to see increasingly? Probably also using this kind of solutions, empowering elements inside of stories, positive psychology maybe?
You know,
or is it just about these negative?
No. I
focused
mean,
stories?
look at all the feel-good movies. Look at all the love movies where they kiss in the end and make out and live happily ever after. But there is an obstacle on the way. I mean, if you would tell a story about, if you would do an investigation about a very special person, fantastic person, who goes from all the hour, from 0 to 60 minutes being fantastic, without facing any resistance. God, what's the story? Really? You should be a painter painting his face. I mean, when I went to journalism school, I hated that. I just wanted to get. It was in the northern parts of Sweden, and I tried to fake that I got, cold allergy, just to get out. But my teacher, he said, in your left pocket, you should have a note saying, what's the story? And in your right pocket, you should have another note saying, what's the story? And when you ask me, do we only need to have a negative conflict? No. But what's the story? How do you sell me? If I would be your editor, why would you want to do this story from the very beginning? The thing that you say in the bar, I met this guy. He's absolutely extraordinary. He managed to do this, even though, there's some obstacle on the way. It's not like, I met this guy and he's Superman without, kryptonite is not a problem. He can do everything. Okay? So the answer to that question is, I love positive stories. It's just another type of conflict. But you still have to establish the characters and the conflict.
Okay, thank you. No, we have to finish.
You decide, yes.
No, we have next session. Thank you, Joachim. You're great.
Hang on, wait a second. I will be hanging around. I will leave my business cards. And if there's a Scandinavian story or if there's anything, email me. If I don't answer directly, I'm busy doing other things, but normally I would answer. So here's my business card. Thank you.
Thank you.